Hey, folks, welcome back to the Roundtable. It's the Roundtable Sessions, and I'm your host, Ron Menser, and I got my brother, Kris Bookman, here with me today. How you doing, Kris?
What's up, brother? So good. How are you?
Oh, man, just living the dream, loving life, and really enjoying these roundtable conversations we've been having. It's a new show. It's all about, what made us into, the men that we are today, how we grew up, what were our influences, and yeah, it's having some guy talk sitting around the table.
Yep. That's what it's about, man. Just guys talking around the fire in the truck on the way to the blind. There's enough hunting stories after that, but this is the stuff you talk about while you're there and
Yeah.
on the way there. So let's get it. Excited. Episode 3. Is this 3? Number 3? The
Yeah,
Trace?
this is episode 3, and we're kicking around like what are some cool things to talk about, and
Yeah.
so we want to bring our guest Dennon Yorks, who is the host of the Tales from the Loft podcast, and he's part of the Treks and Tackle collaborative network. Hey, Dennon, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Hey, man, we're psyched about having you on the show, and talking through some guy stuff. So we're kicking around some ideas of different things that are interesting, and But before we sort of dive into our topic today, why don't you go ahead and just give yourself your bio to the audience and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. I'm Dennon Yorks. I'm 33 years old, Carroll County resident all my life. I dive into anything and everything that is creative or artistic. So like photography, music, podcasting, art, tattooing. I try and have my hands in many different things just to give it a shot, see if I'm any good at it. So I kind of mess with a little bit of everything.
Heck yeah.
Love it, man.
One of the things that Dennon likes to talk about is conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
So
good old conspiracies.
A good way to segue into some different stuff. We've been talking about some influences and some nostalgia on the show, but let's get into let's find out who's going to be the real followers of us now, Ron. Let's get into some conspiracy.
Hey, look, everybody's got an opinion, and some opinions are just more interesting than others. So let's talk through some of this stuff. What's the topic tonight? What road are we going to go down, Dennon?
We can go down Tartaria.
Yes.
Awesome.
It's one of my favorites. I guess to preface conspiracies, anytime someone hears that, there's this negative connotation about it.
Yeah.
Look, to each their own. You can all have your opinions, your beliefs, what have you. The actual word for conspiracy is what we're doing on this podcast. We're just talking. We're conspiring. Ooh, scary and evil.
Yeah.
But like I said, I don't believe in all of them.
Mm-hmm.
I can appreciate the artistic ability that comes to creating one and like how far they take it down the rabbit hole, if you will. Like some of them get a little scary. Some of them are a little out there, but for the most part, if you just come at it with like okay, maybe I'll learn something different or I'll see someone else's perspective on something, they can be fun. And that's the main goal of this.
Yeah, and before we dive in, that's my whole perspective of it. I mean, I have a Deadpool shirt on. I don't think Deadpool's real. Okay, I like watching the movies. I enjoy the comics. I don't think Batman is real. I enjoy reading Batman comics. As a man of faith, a Christian, I enjoy reading Eastern philosophies. I don't necessarily believe in all that stuff, but I enjoy reading different philosophies. It's okay if you don't believe it to still read about it and talk about it, whether it's flat Earth or different science things. It doesn't make you this kook. You can't even talk to some people because they don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
But it's okay to learn. It's just fun to learn about this stuff. It's fun to hear other people's perspectives, like you said, Dennon.
So let me hop in here before we cut Dennon loose on this rabbit trail we're going to run down. Okay. A lot of these theories have truth to them. They
Correct.
might not be full truth, but there are partial truths, which is what makes things believable. And even when Kris says like learning from other cultures and what their beliefs are, and think like certainly we have our own beliefs. Just because another culture has another belief that doesn't align with mine doesn't mean that it's not real either.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of truth out there that is beyond what we were taught here in our little our Western community that we live in. Some of it's dangerous, like Dennon, touched on, and you got to be careful what you dabble in. But it's good to know what you believe, why you believe it, and so I'm interested in having this conversation, Dennon. So let's kick this thing off. Tartaria, which I don't know if you want me to like set it up for you or you want to just take it, man. Go ahead, however you want to go.
And I mean, you can give it the setup if you want, because it does expand a little bit. So just, I guess, give me what you know, and then I'll play off of that.
Well, listen, I mean, basically Tartaria, from my understanding, Tartaria's it speaks of like a global lost empire,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we can, with advanced technology, incredible architecture, they're key proofs for it, that justify it. Like, when you go back to old maps and even some CIA papers referencing it. But the gist is Tartaria was this global culture that was advanced, and the theory is that it's been covered up or erased.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that correct. It Tartaria was a location and then expanded out like throughout what we now know as the world. Whoever had this, the Tartarians had this like within their buildings and the structure of their buildings. One of the big key points of things they had was free energy, which I'm going to brain melt. One of the things I didn't put in the notes, I believe it was Tesla had found free energy and a way to sustain that. And conveniently, it's all erased, and CIA gobbled that up, and now we're all paying electric bills. But just they had flight with the airships. They had buildings that could what's the word I'm looking for? Harmonically, through the use of like copper wiring and magnetism and other things, was able to draw from energy in the world.
Like resonate.
Resonate and power these, early steampunkish type vehicles, not even limiting that to cars, that, it was in airships and stuff like that. Let's see. Kind of how you said, with the structures and like this advanced civilization, almost in Atlantis, if you will, because Atlantis is another one we could go down at another time, but just advanced civilization ahead of its time, or for that time period that it was, that just vanished. One of the last occurrences that kind of ties into that is these world fairs that were going on. It was these ginormous, just super cities, but it was just for this fair. These whole like buildings, apartments, houses, stuff like that, all had this main Coliseum type thing in the middle, and everyone would show off their advances, show off all this crazy technology stuff, and then no one knows where or why or how, but just evaporated and gone. And some of the building structure you see today has ties into that. There's this one theory going around called the mud flood, which was that,
right,
being a Christian, I believe that the Lord flooded the earth. That being said, over time, who's to say someone to erase a civilization didn't cause another flood of some sorts? But you break down some structures in different places, and there is like this whole subset of different. They found a boat under the structure somewhere in New York that was like, this shouldn't be here for the time, like the time periods and stuff don't match. Why is this here? And it's just, built on top of the skeletons of different civilizations is now what we have is like New York.
Yeah.
So
that was recently too. That was 9/11 stuff. They were leveling buildings and they found some kind of massive ship.
Yeah. There was that one. And then I want to say right before COVID, somewhere, not New York, but somewhere pretty prominent, they had gone to re-level and rebuild this building, and they broke into what they thought was just earth, was actually like 3 or 4 levels of continual like other building space, and then when they expanded it just kept going, and they were like, well, we're just gonna seal it off with cement and not ask questions.
Yeah.
So
Conveniently.
I got
You
into
know,
that stuff. I'm sorry.
go ahead, Kris. I got questions, man, but go ahead, shoot.
No, I got into learning about that. Same thing, learning about the architecture and falling down these rabbit holes. And then it gets into the crazy stuff, whether it was World War II. They talk about World War One and Two, that some of the bombings and stuff were to level these things, right? Have you heard that before, Dennon?
yeah, strategic bombings.
Yeah, to get rid of some of that stuff. And then, the basis of a lot of this, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Dennon, the basis of a lot of this, where it was from, was Russia, different parts of Russia, who's been the bad guy for the last 50, 60, 70 years in the world. Russia, let's make them look bad. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. And if you start, again, reading it kind of funny, there was no way there's some civilization like from Avatar, The Last Airbender, with ships and steam and all this stuff. But like, then you start pulling the string a little bit and you read and you're like, okay, well, that makes sense. That was happened for here. And then there's so much of that. I mean, it's such a big area,
Huge.
And then you get into the mud flood, and then we'll talk about this towards the end too, like the missing timeline that people talk about that's just gone. And again, if you align that with the Bible and different things like that, it makes sense to what we think.
How we're missing a month out of the calendar, supposedly.
That's a different one. Yeah, the month of the calendar, and then the 28-day cycles for females, and the moon. And oh man, we're going to start trailing now.
Yeah, so like let's try to take a structured approach to this conversation, because we can be all over the place and we'll lose audience real quick. So let's start with the maps. All right. So geography. Kris, mentioned Russia. And I know, the things that I understand about Tartaria was, some not just run of the mill map makers, like they're like legitimate map makers from back in the day. Have Tartaria listed on their maps, and the area of, some of it was eastern, as far east as like Eastern Europe, but it's mostly Siberia, Mongolia, like that part of the world, which is like modern day Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And then, maps changed over time, and Tartaria has decreasingly become less visible and less visible, over time on our maps, right?
Right.
So any feedback on the map theory, because that's one of the things that is used to justify, that there was this place called Tartaria. There were Tartarians, and certainly I'll play devil's advocate on that as well.
I'll jump in real quick, Dennon, because you're more schooled on this, but there's another school of thought too. Dennon, have you ever heard this that ties in with this, that the actual, what we think of the world's upside down? Have you ever heard that?
Mm-hmm.
And, because that goes into, and again, without trailing off of this, it's part of this. It goes into like, they didn't want the African nations or the Aborigine nations at the top of the world, because that in some sense puts people in a dominant mindset. But it also goes into different things like this. Like you were talking about the map making, Ron. And if you read old things about the Seminole Nation in Florida, they describe Florida as the turtle's head.
Mm-hmm.
With Florida, if we look at a map, what's it look like? A turtle head, right? How would they know that unless there was this other civilization? Unless someone has to have mapped that out to teach these Indians that are living in a swamp. I don't mean that disrespectfully. They were smart. What this looks like? How would they have any clue? So Dennon, take the wheel, bro.
Yeah, the how do I put this? The censoring of maps, or the playing of maps, again, that can trail down to like, if you want to get into flat Earth, which is really fun. I think it's a little out there personally, but at the same time, like some of the stuff does hit key points for other things, and it's fun to research. But like you said, the inverted of, just take the world map that we know today, invert it. So south would be north, north would be south, east would be west, west that whole thing. It'll play too with, like, if you go back to conquesting maps the way they were like, well, no one could ever conquer this area because they'd have to cross this and they'd have to cross that. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're looking at it from this viewpoint. But when you switch the map, kind of like, what was the Pirates of the Caribbean movie where they're switching the map pieces around?
Mm-hmm.
If you invert the map around, suddenly you're like, well, why wouldn't they just go this way? Which is like a lot of, if you research some of the diaries and some of the texts saying we traveled this land and this is the structure. This is you have to think of land bridges that are no longer there anymore. They're underwater. Like,
and that's coming out as fact now. Actual science fact that they found footprints in America that are way older and in a different spot than what they thought was the oldest ones.
Mm-hmm.
So that lends right into what you're saying, Dennon. Continue. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Trying to think what more for the maps. Like the animals that shouldn't be like where they are. I don't have any listed because I didn't write it down, but like some of the animals, say for Australia, they have
those Indonesian islands and stuff down there.
Yeah, that's got animals that you'd see in Africa, and it's like, okay, well then where did they come from? Did they bring them over here? Which I'm sure some of that is, but for the most part, if you go back to like ancient texts and ancient maps, there were land bridges all over the place, and then you could even get into like the continents at one time were one big piece and then broken apart, stuff like that. So it's all, again, like just hitting on one topic is one thing, because it just opens a spider web of like all these different. It just keeps going. It's awesome.
So one of the theories that I've heard to explain away why Tartaria was on maps. We know that's true, but it no longer is on maps. Was at one point Europeans they hadn't explored that land mass of Siberia very much, and so it was kind of like this unknown, the land of the Mongols, the land of Russia, the Tartars, where Tartaria resided, and the more it became known to Western countries, European nations, the smaller that area became, or the more detailed other countries became mapped out, and the large landmass that is known as Tartaria one time has sort of been dwindled down because the land became more and more known. I don't know to the degree of the truth of that, but that's how some of that has been explained. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you can get into some of that, and even like what you said, like the Mongols and different things that were just, they weren't like the Romans or the Greeks that were like, let's conquer this and make it ours and make it better. They were like, we're killing everybody now. Let's burn, go to the next one, right? Who knows? I mean, that could have all been a thing. And what you said is just like the ocean, or, different subject, but just like space, it's so vast that unless you're there, you're not going to know that. It's such a huge area. I mean, there's parts of America that we have never seen. There's parts of the Grand Canyon that people have never explored. There's parts of different things like that. People are rolling their eyes now. There's literally parts of the Grand Canyon that you cannot go in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. There's areas of Grand Canyon that are off limit to the public. Yeah. Like Area 51 type, get away from this area.
Yeah. All right, so we've established that there are ancient maps with Tartaria, the geography, but let's talk about the architecture and the advanced technologies. I mean, because one of the things you touched on was free energy, and we could probably do a whole program on free energy. But when I say architecture, I'm talking about spires, steeples, certain types of star bases, the base of certain pyramids and ziggurats. I don't know. You want to like dive into that piece a little bit?
Yeah. If you look at a lot of, I say ancient, but ancient's the word I'm using in reference for something else. But take a look, like Kris said, at a lot of Russian architecture. You have mainly like you have your block building, and then just the corner pieces have these articulate looking spheres and like points and spires and just a lot of stuff. You're like, okay, that's visually pleasing. Like that's really cool. But then you start researching like Tartaria and these lost civilization stuff kind of ring, one with some of their structures, but the stuff with the Tartarian structures have all these like metal rods and like weird looking antennas and stuff like that coming off of it. At one time, the, free energy, would come in through these spires. And I think even what they're looking at with some of the pyramid stuff now is like if you actually go under the pyramid, there's these ginormous, like just almost mile long. I don't know if they're exactly a mile long, but just these like pillars that run underneath the pyramids. And at one time, they're now thinking it was some sort of like conduit to harness energy, and that even maybe Egyptian type areas, they had free energy as well. Because at one time, the pyramids had gold on top of them. At the point, the most tip top was all gold. And
it's a great
gold,
conductor.
yeah, it's like a giant battery to harness energy. Why they did away with that, who knows? I'll ask BG&E when they send me another bill. But I can tongue in cheek here, but at the same time, it's like Tesla himself has done research and has proven that there's free energy all around you and I. If everyone's struggling to pay a bill, why are we even talking about bills if something like this is here? Is it,
Even if you're looking at so when we say pyramids, we think Egypt because those are the most famous pyramids. But there are pyramids all over this planet, and there are different cultures. So you have them in like India, and you have them in Indonesian islands, and you have them in South America, and I mean Mexico. They all look different, but they're all the same.
And they're all on a path that aligns with stars in the sky.
Everything ties to the stars. Everything ties to the celestial patterns, and they're all mathematically like incredibly accurate.
Yeah.
So we think of like how could simple civilizations come up with something so accurate? And that's where the questions come from.
Yeah, if you follow those, bird trails down to even like what Dennon was saying, the Eiffel Tower. A lot of people think that was, was that really Tartarian? Maybe, but that was some sort of radio conductor for energy and different things. And then if you get into the pyramids, go down to the South American, Central American pyramids. If you've heard people talk about it, but you can stand in one spot and you can whisper, and then people at the top of this thing can hear you. You can stand on these certain stones, and they knew for Greek amphitheaters and for these pyramids that this stone, how it's positioned in the center of this, is going to amplify your voice and your energy without speaking up.
Yeah.
So they were onto something. And then, something that's fascinated me for years, tying into all this, there had to be something that tied them together. And I remember reading in high school that they found cocaine in pharaohs' noses that they've, dug up these mummies. Well, cocaine only grows in one place on the earth, and that's Central America. Where's the other pyramids? These guys with big feathered, deity, different things like that. So there's some tie-in with all that stuff. So, again, like we mentioned at the beginning, it sounds funny until you start reading it and pulling this string and then going here, and it really pulls you in, and you're like, okay, all right.
Well, if you start asking questions, I mean, that's the key is ask questions and have an open mind.
Well, and that's the biggest thing too is, without trying to be political, there's so many people that outright say, I don't trust the government. I don't believe what they say. I don't trust them no matter what side you're on. I hate paying taxes. All they do is lie to us. But every piece of information they get about life and space and education is all vetted and routed through the government, right? And it's like, hey, start thinking for yourself, start reading for yourself, and that's where you circle back. That's why they think this civilization, correct me if I'm wrong, might have been wiped off because it was giving people the freedom of knowledge, the freedom of
too much freedom. Yeah.
And that even goes back to biblical times too, like you said, Den. I mean, you can tie that all in with, where's the line going to be drawn? So,
Yeah, so like Dennon, I'll let you carry the conversation from here, but I definitely could like tie all this back into my biblical beliefs, but I don't think that I want to take us there in this episode. So
I think that we should make this a reoccurring thing. If we can line it up, we should have like a
yeah, we can do more segments like this.
Conspiracy theories with Dennon Yorks, some tales from the loft.
Yeah, I'm down. One of the things you touched on, the building structures and the way that they can amplify sound, and you only have to do like just normal monotone talk, and someone on the other side of the room can hear you. One of my favorite things talking about Tartaria and lost technologies and stuff is this theory I've been playing with recently is the removal of the church bells. So at one time, depending on how you look at a church bell, it was removed for war to make, bombs and bullets and other things like that. But especially in like Rome and other like chapels and I mean, just beautiful, beautiful churches that you look at, the way their structure is built is if you break down music, like the sound waves and stuff like that, a lot of old timey chapels, like the stone cathedrals, whatever they're called, but a lot of those churches, their foundation buildings are built upon a sound wave. The way the walls cave in and like it makes up the alleyways, it makes up, the layout of the church is built upon a sound wave. So that when bells were played, it's a unified, again, I'm still researching it, but the bells at one time when they would ring out almost had like a sound healing. If you want to, that's another theory we could get in. Yeah, there's sound healing. And then if you look at the spiritual use of bells, it was to ward off like bad and evil energy and demons and stuff when it applied to the church. But it also just had this like if you get into fantasy lore, bells keep trolls away and keep werewolves and monsters away, or a bell was used to sound off like an attack was coming and stuff like that. So there's this great significance in why are all these bells gone, why are all these bells missing. But one of my favorite things in researching some of this stuff was just the sound healing, because we're vibrational beings. Like we run off an energy, there's energy all around us, and that kind of the bells resonating dispels negative energy. I'm not talking about like bad energy, but like a battery, you have positive and negative.
Yep.
You hear hippy dippy friends, I'm not making fun of you, I do it sometimes too, but take your socks off and just go stand in the grass. And after a period of time, you kind of do feel like, okay, I feel a little better. Like I've discharged all this, negative energy, if you will, breaking down atoms and stuff like that. I'm not educated on any of this, so it sounds like hoopla, but there is legitimacy to it.
You're connected to the earth.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you read the Bible, we're made from the earth, right? I mean, we're all part of it. And if you get into sound, we talked about music, how much I'm into music, but if you get into how they measure sound and measure sound frequencies, it's through ohms, OHM. And if you get into people that meditate through sound, what do they say? That's what they say. And there's people that really get into the power of sound for healing. I legitimately just read an actual scientific thing that said Beethoven's Fifth has things that can help cure cancer. The sound waves of that and the pressures of that can cure stuff. And again, if you read the Bible, what did they do? They marched around the Jericho how many times and blasted their horns? And I mean, that's got to come from somewhere, and sound fascinates me. And I told both you guys when we started talking about this, I mean, look up the videos of those guys with the sound plates in the sand, with the how the sound can make its own patterns and different things. I mean, it's just,
it's a super interesting topic. And you get into frequencies, and then that leads to like energy, and we can get into like some real woo woo stuff. But
look
like
at
I said at the
Orthodox.
beginning, I was just going to say, like we said at the beginning, like some of this stuff is real. Just because it sounds out there a little bit, it doesn't mean that it's not true.
Well, Orthodox monks too. I mean, you look at their churches and their chapels, it's all bells, and a lot of their chants are like that Gregorian, like throat chanting and stuff like that. I mean, especially when I'm trying to just be at peace and write or read a book or pray and stuff, and I don't want, a phone distracting me, I'll put on like it's just like a ambient noise type thing. A lot of my stuff recently has been like ambient monk chanting, and it's just this like thing that if you have really nice headphones, it almost sends like from the top of your head to your toes. It's like, oh man, this is tingly stuff. It's cool.
It can trance you out.
Yeah.
I mean, no doubt. Like certain tones and frequencies and chants over, repetitively can trance you out.
Well,
And,
I mean,
there's a spiritual element to that too. From my seat.
I know we're on our different podcasts, but tie that back into hunting when the sun comes up and hits you in the face, and the sound of the birds wake. I mean, there's something that is elemental to us, and I know that the dude, kind of got in trouble for using steroids and lying, but that dude, the Liver King, he has these 9 tenets that he lives by, and 2 of them are go outside, what you said, Dennon, get your feet in the ground, get the sun on your face and on your skin.
Mm-hmm.
Don't no sunglasses, get the sun through the eyes, through the face, on the skin. That's what he says. And I know he got in some issues because he was clearly doing massive amounts of steroids and saying he wasn't. But if you read into how he lives his life, but all of that stuff really ties in, grounding and again, different subject. We're trailing off, but another episode I can talk about that. I had some experiences with that with one of my daughters that we actually took to a natural doctor that was like, do this, try this, and I literally laughed out loud in this guy's face when he was doing this stuff, and he's kind of doing this new age stuff, and everything he told us made my daughter better. She had crazy allergies. Again, we'll get into a different episode, but there's tie-ins to this stuff. These ancient cultures had this knowledge of earth and science and spirituality all tied into one, and it's really cool stuff to get into.
Mm-hmm.
So the bells. Let's bring this full circle back to Tartaria.
Yeah, for whom the bells toll.
Yeah, I told you.
Just tying the bell. It was cool to kind of when we first introduced this idea of like, okay, let's pick a topic. You pick a topic. You pick a topic, and kind of along how I think I had bells. You had the hidden timeline. And then that tied into Tartaria, and it was like, okay, well, here's 2 topics that we both like, but the header is Tartaria and this lost civilization, and how, like, yes, it's been erased off the map, who erased it, but it's also what happened between that period of time to where we're at now, where it feels like there's almost a shift, like the timelines don't match up to where there's just, I mean, almost like someone took whiteout and just wiped out this section of years to where it was like, okay, where did this technology go? Where did these people go? Where, because going back to the, what were they? The like great shows or events that they had. I just said
World's Fairs.
World Fair, yeah. After these World Fairs and these cities were no longer in use, they just got wiped off the face of the earth due to war or whatever else was going on. But those people were put on trains and taken to different sections of the world, and now no one even knows if they're a part of that lineage or could have family members from ancient times. Like all that has just been severed at a root somewhere, and no one knows where to connect it or how to even begin finding that again.
Yeah.
So let me play dummy here. What people? For the audience's sake, when you say people were put on the trains and sent to different parts of the world, who are you talking about?
Ancient Tartarians, or
all right.
Yeah. So Tartaria's knowledge or baseline humanity, if you will, this group of people, where they come from, because they kind of did just show up randomly or were discovered. It was kind of like, hey, we all have horses and buggies, and here's these people with like steam powered locomotives. They have energy. Their lights are turning on in their houses without, fire. And then they have these massive, you remember, what was it? The Hindenburg was that big gas, like air-filled thing. Well, they had that with no gas. That was just a giant electric airboat ship that they could go from, wherever. And that kind of ties into what you said about the, in Paris, the Empire State Building, that Eiffel Tower. Empire
Yeah.
State Building, Jesus. A lot of when you research for like those airboat ships, that was their docking station because those ships were almost city-like. They were almost too big to land on the actual ground. So that would be a docking station where an elevator would run people up and down on it, and that's how you'd go. Well, now we have planes. So it's like you went from one technology to another technology. And I'm not saying technology doesn't advance, like, but to just completely wipe out whatever they had technology-wise, and then you look at the updated technology of today, I mean, what happened? Who was the brain person behind it? Was like, hey, we have this. We'll allow forms of it in people's houses, but in a way, it all reverts back because, like, now we have wireless charging. I don't need to plug a cable into this anymore. You just put it on the dock and it goes. So, like,
it goes into other things too. Like if you think about sometimes growing up, and you had an antenna TV, and sometimes that picture was crystal clear. It was good, and there was no lag. Now we have all this great stuff, but if your Wi-Fi is down, you're going to get glitchy lags. Or if there's a cloud in front of the satellite, it's going to glitch out. And you're like, sometimes you're like, okay, that seemed primitive, but was it better?
Right.
Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
Yeah, radio. I mean, how crystal clear. You can still listen to some of these crystal clear radio things from hundreds of years ago, and now radio's glitched. Now there's dead air and stuff like that, and you're like, what is going on? It's
the satellite went behind a meteor. Now I don't have music.
It traveled thousands and thousands of miles, but there was a rain cloud in the way and it glitched out. Like that doesn't make, where are we at here, guys? Come on. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, from an internet perspective, if you're hardwired versus wireless, your hardwire is going to be more reliable, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more primitive technology is sometimes the more reliable technology, and that's why stuff like like over-the-air radio, like ham radio, and that sort of stuff is still it's still like a fallback because we know that stuff works in case of an emergency.
Yeah. I mean, vinyl records. I mean, CDs and tapes came out, and that was a big thing. But people came back to records. They just sound better. The systems sound better. Digital music is compressed. I mean, you can go on. That's totally different rabbit trails to go down, dude.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're a little bit all over. I mean, I've got questions, and I think I got more ideas written down that I want to talk about. But Dennon, if you want to wrap this up and help us land this plane, did you want to talk about the time loss?
The time loss theory,
like, and how that ties in, or do we save it?
It's not so much tying in or saving it. It's just there's a period of time between that generation of Tartarians and like when the world was at this such like a utopia, if you will. Mm-hmm. That suddenly these wars started happening around it. I'm talking World War I, World War II, stuff like that. It's interesting that the beginning of these wars tie into when these civilizations vanish. So like all this knowledge that these people had, all these like expedited, like just the plethora of technology that we don't even know what they had really. We only have the information that's out there that gets, foo-fooed by people. But the lost timeline is there's a missing section of years. I don't know how many years. No one really knows. They want to say it's within 50 to 100 of some sort of years. So we could be living in, 2025 minus 100 is the actual date. But because of, generation this got wiped out and these wars started, all anyone remembers up to that point is when these wars started. And trying to research and go back to these sections, it always ties you back to, well, this is when this war started. It's like, I'm not researching when the war started. I'm researching before the war, not listed, or it sends you to some page that's like, no, this is disproven and this is it. It's like, I don't care if it's disproven. I want to read it.
So me learning, because this is new to me. I don't know much about the lost time period theory, but I know World's Fairs were like the turn of the century, like 1900s. I mean, they had World's Fairs like up into like when was the last World's Fair? Like the 50s, the 60s.
I think the 50s was right about the last, at least in my
Like that's not
dwelling.
that long ago, is what I'm saying.
No.
Like even 1900s, like that's not that long ago. It's like 100 years.
Mhm. Now is this our 100 or their 100?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, 100 years. I mean, I can in my own mind go back through. All right, we knew this, the 90s, we knew the 80s, we knew the 70s, we knew the 60s, we knew the 50s, the 40s. You get into World War II.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, the history that we were taught. You know, the 30s was this period between World War One and leading up to World War II. The 20s was a Great Depression. You know, 1914 I think is World War One, and so like there's definitely some like geopolitical. You know, through World War One and World War Two, I believe there was a lot of geopolitical like shifting, like major shifts in you know, governmental control and way systems and you know, worldwide networks. There was a realignment,
Yeah.
you know, taking
Yeah.
place through those two wars, and I think we're experiencing a little bit of that like now on a global platform. But you know, prior to World War One, you get into like around 1900. I don't know much. You know, when I think of the 1800s, I think of the Civil War. I think of the like in American culture. You know, cowboys, Indians. You know, the late 1700s to 1800s, like that period of time, 1800 to 1900, was the frontier and the settling of this nation. So like that's just me off the top of my head going backwards in time. I don't know. I guess what I'm asking is I don't know what are these years that are missing. I don't because I don't know much about this theory.
The years that are missing, breaking it down that way, again, because I have this theory and I'm still going through some of it,
Sure.
but it's like, so we know wars happened and we know their area where they'd happened. I think maybe some of it, and I'll have to research and come back to you guys with, what I find. But I think some of it is like so we know there's wars happening all around the world, but we're focused on what we're focused on here.
Yeah.
Maybe in the writing, maybe in the translation of during these wars were going on, this stuff was also going on that we have limited knowledge of. So it could have just been like, one of the ripples in this great pond we're in, where we're not really paying attention to it. And now that the dust has settled from these wars, people have gone back and been like, well, this was also going on, coincided with some of this stuff. And it's just a loss in communication. Again, that's on me for saying I
No.
want to talk about it and not be prepped, but it's I don't have a way to explain it other than
Some of that stuff goes way deeper missing timeline than that. It goes into there's some Jewish stuff that gets involved with it. I mean, I'm talking like ancient stuff. Then it gets into Holy Roman Empire stuff, which then starts turning into this Tartaria stuff where this one Holy Roman Emperor wanted to be a certain year, might have been the year 1000. Maybe he wanted to advance it. Am I wrong with that? Is that a thing, Dennon?
So that's what
it's
I've
ringing a
heard.
bell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's two or three things, but then it also ties into, as we kind of wrap this up, there was stuff that happened when you were talking, Ron, about like turn of the century stuff in the 20s and the 30s and 40s. They talked about this on the Ninjas with Butterflies conspiracy theory podcast, but even with light bulbs, have you ever heard this, Dennon? But there was a group of industrialists that said, hey, your light bulbs aren't burning out and we're losing money. So they
Oh
came up
yeah.
with planned obsolescence and they changed this power grid of things like that, same time as Tesla. It all ties in, right? So, as we wrap this up, I mean, the point of this to whoever's listening still is, when we're talking about music or nostalgia and the other ones, like get your brain thinking, like get the wheels turning about stuff, and it's just fun, man. Whether you believe it or not, read about it, learn about it, talk about it with your friends, laugh about it. It's just fun to get the wheels turning. And I tell people all the time, when you get down to it. If the Earth is flat or if it's not flat, it doesn't change the taste of Coca-Cola. It's still
Right.
You're still nothing's gonna change for you except that it is or it isn't. So
Yeah, I love that, Kris. I love it. Dennon, thanks, man, for coming on and having this conversation. It's like Kris
anytime.
said, like if you listen, if you're out there and you're still listening, let us know. Correct us where we're wrong, and let us know if there's a topic out there that you want to hear us talk about. Because I think that we can have these roundtable conversations. I'm not ready for it to end. I just got more questions.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you begin to approach a topic that you don't have all the answers to, and it's like, well, I heard this, and Dennon's like, well, this is what I heard.
Yeah.
So that's what the roundtable's all about.
Yeah, that's our text thread. Check this out. Did you check this, dude?
Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Yeah.
Yeah.
But, hey, real quick, as we sign off, we're not going to talk about them, but what is your favorite conspiracy theory for people to look up? And then maybe we'll talk about another one. What's your favorite one, Ron?
So, listen, I mean, there are things that definitely, I can't give you one because I'm always wanting to learn. Like, certainly some things that I wrote down here is like free energy is available. We are using technologies that there has been technology suppression for the certain people to make money and be profitable, and so technology, it's available to some, but it's been suppressed to the public. So the technology that's available to us is probably 50 to 100 years behind what's actually available to, say, our governments. Okay, superpowers. So free energy, anti-gravity technology. I'd love to talk about that topic. Because I think that's how some of these mega structures have come in. But me, like, I'm a man of faith, and so like there's biblical accounts of giants, and then that tying into the like the Babylonian Anunnaki, coming down and fallen angels and all, and the Nephilim and all that. Like, I could go like super deep into that sort of thing. That's interesting to me, and I believe it to be true. But that's because of my faith. Look, my book says that it's true.
Right.
So, if I had to say I had a favorite, that might be it.
Okay.
And so I also think that can be connected to even some of the stuff that we're talking about of, the building of the pyramids and the sacred geometry and understanding things. I think the celestial beings came to this earth and taught us secret knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we got advanced societies in the past. But we were strictly also commanded not to worship angels, and it didn't turn out well. So, but that's a whole nother episode. So that's longer of an answer than you wanted, Kris, but that's probably like one of my top ones.
What about you, Dennon? What's your favorite one, bro?
Dang, dude, there's so many. I mean, I guess from a creative mind looking at it, I really love flat Earth. Like, and I always say that, and it gets, depending on who you talk to, people kind of look at you like, that's what you believe in? I'm like, I don't necessarily believe it, but I'm also not saying there isn't merit to it. So like, you look at flat Earth, and then you look at like the ice wall is another one, and the lands beyond the ice wall. Yeah, and right. everyone kind of is like, well, what are you talking about? And then you have to break down how the moon is reflecting the Earth, and how some of the shapes on the Earth is like the geography reflected of what we know as Earth. Well, there's more land around on the moon's reflection that corresponds to sections of like missing maps, if you will. So lands beyond. And then you can break down into like how there's the treaty for, was it the Antarctic treaty?
Antarctica. Yeah.
Yeah. Antarctica treaty, despite
it's what another area they don't want you tiptoeing around.
Yeah, despite being at war constantly with all these nations, we're still all in unity about what's going on in Antarctica. It's like, come on, okay, what's in Antarctica then? Like, what's going on there? It's just like, to hone in on one, I can't give any specific one merit, but I just, as someone who enjoys breaking down and researching some of these, it's like, I guess all of them as a whole. I just get like amped up talking about them.
Right.
This has been a cool episode, dude. You did a great job.
Heck yeah, cool.
How about you?
Kris?
What's yours?
What about you, man? Yeah.
Antarctica is a big one. I love flat Earth stuff. Again, I don't know that I believe it. Again, does it matter if it is or isn't? You know, you showed me a map one time what people think it looks like, that blew my mind because my brain couldn't process a thing. And you're like, check this out. That's cool. I had a guy one time tell me, oh, well, the Earth can't be flat because of GPS. Okay. Or whatever, dude.
Okay.
I get real into like some space stuff. Like I always mess with people and I always say space is water. There's a big thing where people say space is water. You know, that's different subjects for a different time. I love time travel stuff. I love reading about that and the science with that type of stuff. And I told both of you about the
that's just me texting you guys.
Okay. The Vatican actually has this documented catalog thing called the chronographer, and it's been debunked a little bit because maybe it is true. That's supposed to like capture time frequencies, and you could almost like radio wave stuff that we're talking about. All that stuff fascinates me. The supernatural stuff tied in with it fascinates me. So tell us what you guys want to hear. Start thinking about it. Get your brains churning, man. Think outside the box and talk with your friends, man. Invite them over for a Coke and a beer. You know, don't buy all the Aldi's root beers. Ron likes those. So
love them, man. They're all sold out.
Yeah.
Dennon, final words, man. How can people find you?
Tales from the Loft on Spotify. It's just a little podcast I'm growing. So I appreciate you guys pulling me in under your umbrella. Hopefully get more views and just build this community of fun that we're having, whether it be conspiracies, talking, rambling, or about hunting. I appreciate y'all bringing me along.
Thanks
man. So it's a blast. Appreciate you guys. This is the Roundtable. We're going to be signing off. Drop us a comment. Tell us what you think of this episode. And remember, you guys always have a spot at the table.
Yep.
See you next time.
Space is water.
See you guys.
See you dudes.